The conference room buzzed with tension as Clara pushed her chair back, the screech of metal against polished wood cutting through the air like a knife. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the edge of the table, knuckles white against the dark wood. Across from her, 3 executives sat stiffly in their expensive suits, their faces carefully arranged into masks of professional detachment. "We've made our decision," said Mr. Thompson, his voice carrying that infuriating blend of condescension and forced sympathy. "Your methods are outdated. The company needs to move forward, embrace new technologies and approaches." Clara's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing the 35 years she'd dedicated to this company. 35 years of late nights, missed family gatherings, and countless innovations that had kept them ahead of the competition. And now they called her work outdated? "But the quantum encryption algorithm she began, her voice stronger than she expected. "Was groundbreaking 10 years ago," interrupted Ms. Rodriguez, the youngest member of the board, barely old enough to remember when Clara had revolutionized secure communications. "We need someone who can lead us into the next decade, not dwell on past achievements." The words hit Clara like physical blows. She wanted to argue, to point out that her so-called past achievements were still funding half their research department. That her latest project could make their current encryption methods look like child's play. But something in their eyes, that dismissive gleam she'd seen too many times before, told her it was futile. As she gathered her belongings from her office for the last time, Clara's fingers brushed against the edge of an old photograph frame. She paused, staring at the image of herself standing beside her mentor, Dr. Harrison, the day they'd received their first patent. Back then, she'd been the young prodigy, full of fire and ideas that others dismissed as impossible. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her phone buzzed incessantly in her pocket, notifications piling up from colleagues who suddenly remembered they'd never taken her out for lunch, from subordinates who needed recommendations, from tech journalists asking for comments. She ignored them all, focusing instead on the weight of the manila folder in her other hand. Inside were the blueprints for her latest invention, the one they'd laughed off during yesterday's presentation as quaint. They didn't understand that beneath its deceptively simple design lay a breakthrough that could redefine data security for generations. She'd spent 3 years perfecting it, working weekends and holidays while others enjoyed their modern efficiencies. The security guard at the front desk gave her a sympathetic nod as she passed, his expression mirroring dozens of others she'd encountered throughout her career. That look of "I'm sorry things didn't work out," tinged with the unspoken acknowledgement that age discrimination remained one of corporate America's dirtiest secrets. Outside, the autumn wind whipped through the streets of San Francisco, carrying with it the scent of distant rain and broken promises. Clara pulled her coat tighter around her, feeling the chill seep through more than just her clothes. At 62, she should be preparing for retirement, not starting over. Yet as she walked past the gleaming glass towers of Silicon Valley, watching young entrepreneurs pitch their dreams to investors in coffee shops, a spark ignited within her. They thought they could discard her like yesterday's technology, but they'd forgotten one crucial detail: she still owned the patents to several key components of their most profitable products, including the very technology that had just secured them a $7 million investment. Clara's steps quickened as she approached her modest apartment building. Inside her home office, surrounded by decades of research and development, she spread out her notes across the worn oak desk. Each equation, each schematic represented not just years of work, but pieces of her soul poured into innovation. Her phone rang again, this time displaying a number she recognized immediately. It was David Chun, the rising star of venture capitalism whose recent success had been built largely on her work. His firm's latest acquisition, the one he'd been celebrating with champagne photos on social media, relied heavily on algorithms she developed during her tenure. Let him wait, she thought, tracing her finger along the complex patterns of her newest design. For once, time was on her side. The contracts might have changed hands, but the intellectual property remained hers. And unlike the board members who dismissed her, Clara understood the true value of what she held. She opened her laptop, watching as lines of code scrolled across the screen. This wasn't just about revenge or proving them wrong, though both thoughts crossed her mind. No, this was about showing an industry obsessed with youth and novelty that experience and wisdom still held power. That sometimes, looking backward could be the most innovative step forward. The clock struck midnight as Clara began drafting emails to former colleagues, industry contacts, and potential partners. Each message carried the same core message: change was coming, and this time, it would be led by someone who understood the foundations upon which true innovation was built. Through her window, the city lights blurred together like stars, reminding her of another night decades ago when she'd first arrived in San Francisco with nothing but a suitcase and a head full of ideas. Back then, they'd called her naive. Now, they called her obsolete. The laugh that escaped her lips held no humor, only determination. Tomorrow would bring challenges, legal battles, public scrutiny, perhaps even attempts to discredit her work. But as Clara prepared for sleep, her mind already racing with strategies and possibilities, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the thrill of creating something entirely new. In the quiet darkness of her bedroom, surrounded by the ghosts of inventions past, Clara made a silent promise. This wouldn't be the end of her story. It would be the beginning of a new chapter, one where experience and innovation danced together in ways the tech world had yet to imagine. The morning light filtered through her curtains, illuminating the patents displayed on her wall, each one a testament to years of struggle and triumph. As she brewed her coffee, the rich aroma mixing with the crisp autumn air, Clara began making calls. First to her lawyer, then to a journalist friend who specialized in tech exposés, and finally to an old colleague who'd left the company under similar circumstances. Each conversation added pieces to the puzzle forming in her mind. The board's dismissal wasn't just personal, it reflected a broader pattern in the industry. Younger executives climbing the ladder on the backs of established innovations, dismissing their creators as relics of a bygone era. Clara realized she wasn't alone. Dozens of brilliant minds had been cast aside in similar fashion. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she composed a detailed breakdown of her latest project. The algorithm represented more than just technical advancement, it embodied everything she'd learned about security vulnerabilities in modern systems. While others chased flashy interfaces and artificial intelligence, she'd focused on fundamental weaknesses that could bring entire networks crashing down. The phone rang again, this time showing a number from her past. Dr. Margaret Hayes, her former research partner, now heading a cybersecurity think tank. Their conversation stretched for hours, weaving through technical details and shared frustrations. Margaret's voice carried the same fire Clara felt burning within her. "They don't understand what they're losing," Margaret said, her British accent sharpening with emotion. "These young executives see technology as disposable, like mobile phones. But security isn't something you upgrade every 2 years. It requires depth, history, understanding of how systems evolve." Clara nodded, though her friend couldn't see. Exactly. They've built their empire on foundations they don't even comprehend. When those foundations crack, they'll wish they'd listened. The challenge lay in timing. Her patents weren't just valuable, they were essential. Several major corporations depended on her work, including some of the biggest names in tech. If she played her cards right, she could force an industry-wide reckoning about the true cost of discarding experience. Her laptop pinged with incoming messages, responses from her initial outreach. Some offered support, others advice, and a few expressed cautious interest in collaboration. One email stood out, a young developer named Alex Kim, who'd been following Clara's work since university. His message brimmed with genuine admiration and practical suggestions for modernizing her interface designs. This was the key, Clara realized. Not rejecting progress, but integrating it with wisdom. Her strength lay in understanding both the historical context of technological development and the potential pitfalls of rushing forward without proper safeguards. Like the time she'd prevented a major security breach by recognizing patterns others had dismissed as insignificant. Her mind drifted back to that incident. The company had been pushing for rapid deployment of a new system, ignoring her warnings about structural vulnerabilities. Only her insistence on thorough testing had revealed the flaw that could have compromised millions of users' data. At the time, they'd praised her diligence. Now, they called it paralysis by analysis. The irony stung, but it also fueled her resolve. Clara began sketching a plan, combining her traditional strengths with modern approaches. She would create a hybrid system that incorporated elements of machine learning with classical cryptographic principles. Something that respected both the speed of contemporary processing and the caution born of experience. Her phone vibrated again, this time with a news alert. The company had issued a press release announcing their new direction and fresh leadership. Reading between the lines, Clara saw the truth. They were scrambling to distance themselves from her contributions while quietly trying to negotiate continued access to her patents. A smile tugged at her lips. Let them squirm. She knew exactly how long they could survive without her intellectual property, approximately 6 months before critical systems began failing. By then, she intended to have positioned herself as the industry's conscience, forcing conversations about sustainable innovation and ethical technology development. The afternoon sun warmed her living room as she worked through equations, occasionally pausing to add notes in the margins. Her cat, Schrödinger, curled up beside her papers, occasionally batting at stray pens. The domestic scene contrasted sharply with the storm brewing in her mind. Clara's fingers paused over her keyboard as she considered the broader implications. This wasn't just about her or even her immediate industry. It was about challenging the narrative that older workers became irrelevant in fields dominated by youth culture. About proving that experience could drive innovation just as effectively as fresh perspectives. Her thoughts turned to the young developers she'd mentored over the years, many of whom had gone on to create successful startups. They often credited her with teaching them not just technical skills, but how to think critically about the impact of their work. Perhaps it was time to reach out to them, to build a network that bridged generations rather than dividing them. The sound of footsteps in the hallway broke her concentration. Her neighbor, Mrs. Patel, was returning from her daily walk. Through the thin walls, Clara could hear her shuffling about, watering plants and humming softly. Another reminder of the value of longevity, of roots that ran deep in a world obsessed with constant movement. As evening approached, Clara found herself drawn to her bookshelf, pulling down volumes that had shaped her thinking over the decades. Cryptography manuals, philosophy texts, even old science fiction novels that had inspired her earliest experiments. Each one represented a piece of her journey, a stepping stone toward the present moment. She spread them across her dining table alongside her technical documents, creating a mosaic of influence and inspiration. Here was where she would build her new foundation, combining the wisdom of the past with the possibilities of the future. Not to prove anyone wrong, but to demonstrate that true innovation came from respecting both. The city lights twinkled outside her window as she worked, mapping connections between concepts that others had long abandoned. Her phone continued to buzz with messages, each one adding another thread to the tapestry she was weaving. Some offered resources, others shared similar stories of being dismissed, and a few simply expressed solidarity. Clara's fingers flew across her keyboard, drafting proposals and technical specifications. She wasn't just planning a comeback, she was designing a movement. One that would force the tech industry to confront its biases about age and experience. To recognize that sometimes, looking backward was the most radical way forward. Her thoughts turned to the upcoming tech conference where David Chun would be presenting his firm's latest acquisition, the one built on her work. She smiled, already crafting her response. This time, when they tried to write her out of the narrative, she would be ready. Not with anger, but with evidence that true innovation required both vision and wisdom. The hours slipped away as she worked, fueled by a combination of vindication and purpose. Outside, the city hummed with activity, oblivious to the storm gathering in this small apartment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to demonstrate that experience wasn't a liability, but the most valuable asset of all. Clara leaned back in her chair, surveying the organized chaos surrounding her. Papers covered every surface, laptops displayed multiple streams of information, and whiteboards filled with equations and diagrams lined the walls. Yet amidst this whirlwind of preparation, a clear path emerged. One that combined the best of what she'd learned with the possibilities of what could be. Her phone lit up with another message, this time from an unexpected source. A prominent venture capital firm, known for its progressive approach to technology investment, wanted to discuss potential partnerships. Their timing couldn't have been more perfect. Clara allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before responding professionally, arranging a meeting for later in the week. The realization struck her that she wasn't fighting alone. Across the industry, others had been waiting for someone to challenge the status quo, to prove that innovation didn't have to come at the expense of experience. Her battle wasn't just personal redemption, it was becoming a movement that resonated with countless professionals who had watched their contributions dismissed in favor of trendy new approaches. Her gaze fell on the stack of letters from younger developers, many of whom had reached out after hearing whispers of her situation. Their words carried a mixture of admiration and frustration, describing their own struggles to be taken seriously while maintaining respect for foundational knowledge. These weren't just supporters, they were potential collaborators, eager to bridge the gap between generations of technological development. Clara's attention shifted to her financial records spread across the dining table. The numbers told a compelling story, not just of her personal worth, but of the industry's dependence on mature innovations. She began calculating projections, demonstrating how companies that embraced both experience and innovation consistently outperformed those chasing fleeting trends. The data painted a picture far more convincing than any emotional argument. Her phone rang again, this time displaying a number she hadn't expected to see. It was Richard Lang, the CEO of a major cybersecurity firm that had licensed several of her earlier patents. His voice carried a mix of concern and opportunity. "Clara, I think it's time we had a serious conversation about your latest work. The industry needs what you're developing, whether they realize it yet or not." Their conversation stretched for nearly an hour, covering technical details and market strategies. Richard's insights added another dimension to her plans, suggesting ways to position her innovations not as replacements, but as enhancements to existing systems. Together, they sketched out a framework for introducing her hybrid approach to the market, combining the reliability of proven methods with the efficiency of modern techniques. As she hung up, Clara noticed the time, nearly midnight. Yet her mind raced with possibilities, each more exciting than the last. She moved to her whiteboard, sketching a timeline that integrated legal actions, product launches, and strategic partnerships. The pieces were falling into place faster than she'd anticipated. Her thoughts turned to the upcoming industry conference, now less than 2 weeks away. She began drafting her presentation, weaving together technical demonstrations with case studies that highlighted the dangers of dismissing established expertise. Each slide became a bullet point in her growing arsenal, designed not to attack but to educate. The cat jumped onto her desk, knocking over a cup of cold coffee. As she cleaned up the spill, Clara's eyes fell on an old photograph tucked between books. It showed her standing beside Dr. Harrison at their first major conference, both of them barely older than the fresh-faced developers who now dismissed her work. The memory brought a bittersweet smile. Had she ever seemed that young, that sure of her place in the world? Returning to her desk, Clara began organizing her materials into distinct categories: technical documentation, business plans, marketing strategies, and personal narratives. Each category represented a different facet of her campaign to reshape the industry's understanding of innovation. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was building a template for others to follow. Her phone buzzed with another notification, this time from a major tech publication requesting an interview. Their timing suggested they'd caught wind of her plans, probably through the same grapevine that had alerted Richard Lang. Clara crafted a careful response, neither confirming nor denying anything, but leaving the door open for future discussion. The hours slipped away as she worked, her focus absolute. Outside, the city transitioned from night to dawn, streetlights dimming as the first rays of sunlight illuminated her papers. Each document, each calculation represented not just her personal fight, but a chance to redefine how the industry valued experience and wisdom. When her alarm finally went off, Clara realized she hadn't slept. Yet she felt more energized than she had in years. Today would bring meetings with potential allies, strategy sessions with her legal team, and possibly even a confrontation with the company that had dismissed her. She dressed carefully, choosing clothes that spoke of authority and experience without appearing outdated. As she prepared to leave her apartment, Clara paused by the window, watching the city wake up below. The tech world had always moved fast, devouring innovations and spitting out creators once they'd served their purpose. But today felt different. Today, she carried not just her own story, but the hopes of everyone who had ever been told they were obsolete. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, another message, another opportunity. This time, she didn't hesitate before answering. The game was changing, and she intended to be at the center of that transformation. Not because she sought revenge, but because she understood something her detractors had forgotten: true innovation required roots as well as wings. The elevator descended smoothly, carrying her toward whatever challenges the day would bring. Clara straightened her shoulders, feeling the weight of decades of experience settle comfortably around her like a well-worn coat. Let them try to write her out of the narrative. She carried the proof of their dependence in her briefcase, and the determination to reshape an entire industry in her heart. The lobby doors slid open, revealing a world that had underestimated her once too often. Clara stepped into the morning light, ready to demonstrate that sometimes, the most revolutionary act was remembering what truly mattered. Behind her, The city buzzed with energy, unaware that one of its oldest players was about to become its most unexpected innovator. The conference hall buzzed with anticipation as Clara took the stage, her presence commanding silence. On the massive screen behind her, she displayed not just her latest algorithm but a timeline of innovations, hers and others, that had been dismissed only to become foundational years later. The audience leaned forward, captivated. "This isn't about me," Clara began, her voice steady and resonant. "It's about what we lose when we discard experience in favor of trends. It's about remembering that every new idea stands on the shoulders of those who came before." She revealed how her hybrid system, a blend of classical cryptography and modern AI, outperformed anything currently on the market. Companies that had licensed her patents were already seeing results, and testimonials from industry leaders flashed across the screen. Then came the moment she'd waited for. David Chen, sitting in the front row, shifted uncomfortably as Clara addressed him directly. "You built your success on my work, Mr. Chen. And while I don't hold grudges, I do believe it's time you acknowledged where innovation truly begins." The room erupted into murmurs. Reporters scrambled for their notebooks. By the end of her presentation, Clara wasn't just speaking to the crowd, she was addressing an entire industry guilty of undervaluing its elders. Within weeks, Clara launched her own firm, backed by investors who understood the value of sustainable innovation. Her technology became the gold standard, forcing competitors to rethink their approach. Young developers flocked to her mentorship programs, eager to learn from someone who saw the bigger picture. As for the company that had fired her, they quietly reached out, hoping to renegotiate access to her patents. Clara smiled as she declined, not out of spite, but because they no longer needed them. She'd already moved far beyond what they could comprehend. One evening, standing on her balcony overlooking San Francisco, Clara sipped tea and watched the city lights flicker like stars. Schrödinger purred at her feet, and she felt a deep sense of peace. She hadn't set out to prove anyone wrong. She'd simply reminded the world that true progress honors the past while embracing the future. And in doing so, Clara had secured her legacy, not as someone cast aside, but as the visionary who changed the rules of the game forever.